Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Lipstick Gang. I'm Vanessa, and with me today I have an amazing guest. This is Jasmine Smith, one of my absolute besties, an absolute powerhouse of a woman. Hi Jasmine, how are you doing?
Good. Slightly
So
tired.
Jasmine, are you? Well, it is morning in Australia and it is evening over here in London, so we're definitely making use of that time difference to catch up. So Jasmine, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So, Jasmine Smith, I am a New Zealander by birth and was brought up in New Zealand. I spent my 20s plus in Hong Kong. So I was there for 14 years. And now I'm in Australia with my husband. I have two little ones, a 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, and a business called Raven and Rose, which is a lingerie brand. And yeah, I think that kind of, yes, I think that sums up the basics.
It's a good little sort of CV of yours there, just runs off all of the most important bits.
And my yes, heritage.
Exactly. So we've known each other for quite a few years, but obviously you now live in Australia and I'm in London, but we both were living in Hong Kong when we first met. But you recently moved, didn't you? You moved during a pandemic to a different continent. How are you? How are you settling in?
Yeah, I have settled in. Australia has proven to be an absolutely beautiful country, an easy country to kind of merge into, different from my culture, however, close enough to be able to understand the quirks and the ticks of it relatively fast, and a very accepting culture. So it's been surprisingly easier than I would have anticipated. I am now 6 months into being here. I did move it was at the beginning of COVID. So I had already been through about 4 months of COVID in Hong Kong, and we were on shutdown level. Hong Kong was. It was masks everywhere. Schools had been shut down for months. Hand sanitizer, like it was no socializing, limited numbers, and it was at the beginning, so everyone was like at the height of being scared, and the world was a little bit scared of Asia as well. So
Yeah.
we weren't in a nice position at all. We had My family and I had already, prior to COVID, started the process of moving out of Hong Kong. So we had all our paperwork and everything like in line. COVID was not the reason we moved. However, it was the reason we kind of fast tracked that a little and got to Australia, which, yeah, I mean, and that was once we hit Australia, it wasn't clear running either. So we arrived in Sydney. We were here for 3 days. And during that period, we found a house to rent. And then we thought, oh, we'll go up to Noosa. Noosa is in Queensland, a flight away from Sydney. We thought, oh, we'll go there and have, some family, some chill time in a little beach house that we own. And we just really needed to kind of come down from the epicness that Hong Kong is and just have a bit of quietness. So we left and went to Noosa, where we got stuck because then Australia shut down. And so we were in another state. And yeah, we got shut. We couldn't get back to Sydney. We couldn't start our lives in Sydney. We were living out of suitcases. We had been living out of suitcases since January. This was March. So it had been a while. And we then had to kind of scrap all our plans and continue this very vague in between life in this beautiful beach town, but not knowing anyone, not having any food in the pantry during an epidemic where the supermarkets were cleared out. We had no toilet paper like everybody else. We had
Oh no.
nothing to stand on. So it wasn't as relaxing as anticipated. We had to let go of the house that we originally found in Sydney, and we just had to kind of ride it out.
But you're in Sydney now and you are settled.
We made it back. Yes. So after we made it back, there was a little bit of a loophole where you could cross borders for work. And so my husband's work is over here, and we were able to find flights and get ourselves back to Sydney about 3 months later. We found a house online, which turned out there was like 2 houses online at that time, which we could choose out of. Found one, just so happened to be by one of the best schools, which was amazing for my kids. Just so happened to be in this beautiful, like, little community where there's shops in a little village just down the road. There's a back alley where all the kids come out and play. So we got really lucky with a few things that just worked in our favor without us having to push for it. So once we got to Sydney, yes, it was a relatively kind of easy settle once we, could get our shipment from Hong Kong, once we could get the kids to school, once we could kind of start formulating our lives again.
God, that sounds like crazy disruption. I mean, a move alone, just moving, is stressful enough. Moving countries is stressful enough. Moving during a pandemic, worldwide pandemic, is stressful enough. And then factor in the any government really, just then starting to shut things down. I can't even imagine the couple of months that you've been through. But you're settled now, which is great. And you're obviously in your beautiful home in Sydney, and the kids are all sort of at school, and you guys are actually like getting on with Australian life now, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it is different because obviously rules and regulations are still in place. So socializing is a little bit hard, networking is a little bit hard, getting into work environments. My husband can only go in a few days every 2 weeks to his office.
Wow.
That's what his company has put in these regulations. So even he's from Australia, but he's been away for so long, and even he's finding it hard to kind of meet his colleagues because he never sees them. So yes, here and settled, and trying to kind of just come to terms with this new world of being quite isolated.
Yes, I mean, I think we're all trying to come to terms with this new normal, and navigating what that looks like. Yeah, it's a crazy time, but obviously you have your own business. I mean, you have 2 little ones as well, which keep you busy enough. But on top of that, just casually, running a business, being an amazing lingerie designer. You've worn quite a lot of hats in your professional life in terms of, since I've known you. You were a stylist, you were a blogger. But I want to know, what was your first ever job?
Ooh, my first ever job. I worked at KFC. I was
Did you?
14, yeah. I was 14. I told them I was 15 because you had to be legally 15. But I was like, close enough, fine. I wanted to earn 500 New Zealand dollars. I was on $4 something an hour at the time, and I had to do the graveyard shifts, which were they started at 10 o'clock, and I'd work till 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I had to use some of my money to taxi home because I didn't have a driver's license. So I had to use some of my pay to get home. But my goal was like $500. I was vegetarian at the time. I didn't eat fast food, but I wanted to hit this goal. So, and it was the only job I could get, actually. So, yeah. So I
Oh
did it.
my
I made
God.
500 and I got out of there.
That's amazing. I mean, that sums you up in a nutshell, I think. You're a very driven, very goal-orientated person, and when you put your mind to something, you definitely go for it. But obviously, moving on from KFC, you did eventually find yourself much more engrossed in the fashion world, which is how we met in Hong Kong. You started a community out there called Hong Kong Fashion Bloggers, and I was sort of writing at the time, and I was involved with a few different media companies and kind of working in editorial stuff, and that's how we met. So I want to know, did you always want to work in fashion? Is that kind of the industry that you always saw yourself going into?
Oh, absolutely. I don't. To tell the truth, I don't even think it was an option for me to work in any other industry. Fashion had always felt, it just always felt like a given. It always felt like a given. I really didn't imagine anything else. I don't know if I knew exactly what I was going to do in fashion. And to tell the truth, I don't think it exactly mattered either. I just knew that was the industry that I felt my most comfortable and could give my best, if want for a better kind of sum up there. But yeah, I felt that's where my skills were most utilized.
What was your first ever fashion job?
Ooh. Um, my fashion jobs have always been very self-run. So, for example, when I was in primary school, I used to sew scrunchies and make like beaded necklaces and sell them to like the students and the teachers. And running on from that, I've just always done something along those lines. So I worked as a freelance fashion stylist during uni and out of uni. So what that kind of encompasses is like styling music video clips or working on catwalk shows, putting together editorials for magazines, lookbooks for brands, basically visually piecing together fashion elements so that it could make sense in a magazine as a single picture, or on the catwalk as a flow. So my jobs are always, I always created my own work. I never got a job in the industry. I always created work for myself.
Which is interesting because then you continued on in that sort of frame of being an entrepreneur by launching Raven and Rose, your fashion baby, your lingerie brand. So, what inspired you to launch Raven? Well, first off, when did you launch the brand?
Ooh, now the brand was launched after my daughter was born, who is now, she's just about to turn 6. So it's like 6 years old. However, I started it before that. I would have started it about a year before that. And it took me about a year to create it and get it up and running. I had many setbacks at the beginning. Oh, so
Any
many
you care
setbacks.
to share?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're not happy stories, but my first year was a tough year. I worked with an agent who eventually, to cut a long story short, knew she was going under. So she, unknown to me, she knew that her company was going under, and she took on some quite naive clients like myself. This was my first venture into production. And basically she, had me paying this bill and that bill and this bill and that bill, and promised and promised and promised and promised. And I used my entire savings on creating Raven and Rose. And then at the end of it, the factory shut down. She left the country. My money was gone. I had no goods. So yeah, I took her to court. I won at court, but she'd already filed for bankruptcy and left the country. So there was pretty much
Jesus.
nothing that could be done. And that was heartbreaking. So that was a year of work while I was pregnant. It was all my savings. It was all my patterns, all my samples, everything that Raven and Rose was just got wiped away with her doing that.
Shit.
And I literally had to start from the very beginning the next year with a newborn.
Jesus. I mean, okay. Yeah, setback or what? Bloody
And
hell. That's well, I guess you have to learn these things at some, you just learn from experience, don't you? And the only thing to do at that stage is just, pull up your bootstraps and just be like, right, that was shit. I'm gonna have to move on.
Absolutely. And the lessons I learned were epic. They were epic. Um, and what eventuated from that was quite cool, because I had been working on this product for a year. I had Photoshop, I had shot all my products. I had my social media up and running. I had a decent following, organic following already. People
Mm.
assumed Raven and Rose was a brand that was operating, not that I had any stock or anything, but it was establishing itself. And because I had all that content and all that work, I then could take all of that to a new factory, and they understood the vision immediately. They could see what I was wanting to produce, which was quite different from what they had previously been producing. But because I had put in all the work, they could see it and could value where it was going to go and could see that I was someone worth backing, basically, and took me on. So I ended up with a factory that produces agent provocateur. They work for Bend On. What else do they do? They do Fairform. They do some beautiful, Al McPherson they used to do. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful brands. Very big name brands. And I was not big name. I didn't come from a big background of money. I didn't have what they were used to. But they wanted to try a different way of pattern making, try a different way of producing. And so together we could do that. And that only eventuated because I had this bulk of work that the other factory had let me down on. So.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess it all worked out in the end, and it is an experience that it's like baptism of fire, right? You just have to kind of go through those moments that make you so much stronger and so much more savvy, and just kind of, and I guess in a way, like you said, it gave you that opportunity to almost kind of have a practice run at it the first time round. I mean, obviously, you know, it's, if you can take any positives from that experience, it was kind of like it was your rehearsal before it was like the big thing.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, I would prefer not to have gone through it and lost everything. Like, it was just
Yeah.
so devastating. However, what became of that mistake was epic. So I'm in a much better place because of it. You're so right. And I learned so much, so much.
So what inspired you to start a lingerie brand? Because
Hmm.
Raven and Rose is quite different from your like, you obviously created it to be quite different from very traditional, stereotypical, I guess, cookie cutter lingerie that was out there. So what was it that inspired you to start the brand?
I when I went through university, I went through fashion school and university, I sewed and made lingerie back then. So it wasn't a new element for me. It was something that I've always had an interest in. And I guess that stems from um, having an interest in sexuality and the way people project that, and what's acceptable, what's not, what's sexy, what's stereotypical, which is a topic that I also worked in art school. So I went through both visual art school and fashion school. And so with those kind of two elements combined, I then moved into the obvious for me, which was lingerie. When I left university, however, I refused to be an emerging designer. I was like, nope, when I design, I'm going to be a designer. Nothing kind of new and up and coming and emerging. I just wanted to be it. So I left university, went through 10 years of, as you mentioned before, styling and working as a blogger and creating networks and meeting the right people and understanding media, both traditional and social. And then when I got to a point where I felt comfortable with all of that, I was like, this is it. I'm going to start my brand. I had been working for a lot of lingerie brands in Hong Kong already. I had been doing like style parties and teaching people how to wear underwear, what t-shirt to work with what bra, or what dress to wear with what pair of knickers, and how to change your shape and your attitude via lingerie. And it just it became very clear that there were very limited options for a certain niche of female, being the more tomboy, more flat-chested, more kind of boyish looking female. In Hong Kong, there was a lot of underwire, a lot of padding, a lot of kind of manipulating a female's original shape. And that was something that, one, I didn't appreciate, and two, others didn't either. So I wanted to create a brand for a niche of females that I thought were bigger than mainstream would accept. And hence creating Raven and Rose, which really is a brand that is made for people just on the females on the, actually not just females, but we'll get into that later. People that are on the outskirts of the traditional body shape that lingerie is created for. So it is literally the opposite of Victoria's Secret.
Good. I love that. Well, I absolutely love the brand. I've been a fan right from launch. I think you described it as it was for that sort of rebellious girl who enjoys drinking whiskey, who prefers, what was it, soft bondage over soft lace, which I thought was such a fantastic description of the brand. I absolutely love your mission statement. I think it's so accurate. And it's such an accurate description of the aesthetic that you go through. I'm really interested to know, because you launched the brand in Hong Kong. Obviously, it is available internationally, but you launched it specifically in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong and other Asian markets do tend to have a stereotypically more sort of conservative and prudish culture, a bit more sort of around modesty, I guess, or traditional ideals of femininity. How did you find the experience launching quite a, I guess for some people, a provocative aesthetic in what would be considered maybe a more modest culture? How did you find that experience?
First word that comes to mind is exciting. I think people were very ready for it. The media jumped on it. I got amazing spreads and like Tatler and Prestige and on WWD and Fashion One TV almost automatically, because it was just so different. It was so different, but it wasn't offensive. And I think people could, there's an acceptance and a softness to it, even though it's quite sexy and it's quite, rebellious, as you said. There's also an acceptance to it. And I think people really needed that at that stage. I think the females really needed just an acceptable outlet, and Raven and Rose seemed to fit into that really well. There were some interesting learning curves with the culture itself. For example, nipples are a no-no, and I did not realize that about the Asian culture. Like, I remember having customers come in and be like, "Well, what about my nipples?" And I was like, "What about your nipples?" I'm a little bit, I don't know what you mean. And they'd be wearing like a very stiff cotton shirt and a blazer over top, and there was no nipples in sight. However, they were like, "Oh, no, if there's no padding over it, what do I do?" And so I created a line of nipple pasties that were flesh colored, these little plaster looking things, which for me were offensive. However, for the Hong Kong culture at the time, were exactly what they needed. So I'd send out these little pasties and be like, "Babe, I got you, put the pasty on." They're like, yeah, we got this. So that was a great little in between to hide the nipple.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious, because that reminds me of a conversation that we had with our group of friends, our little lipstick gang. You might remember this, you might not, but it really sticks out in my mind. I can't remember if it was on WhatsApp or Instagram, but either which way, in our group, we had an interesting conversation, because I think someone shared there was another lingerie brand, or there was another underwear brand that had shared an image of their model wearing their lingerie, but the nipple obviously was visible through the lace or through the fabric, but they didn't try to they airbrushed it out, but as in like they literally just removed her nipple. I remember we were talking about that. I was just thinking, this is absolutely ridiculous. What are your thoughts on modesty culture, especially on social media? How do you navigate that with your social media for Raven and Rose? Because you do have a lot of sheer in your designs.
I do. It's pretty much all sheer. Oh gosh, how do I navigate it? I do a fair amount of like little blurs or little kind of rub outs of the nipple, for rules' sake. Otherwise, I would be completely blocked. I don't think Instagram likes me very much at all. I'm constantly getting warnings and days where I'm just blocked from making comments or posting anything. So I do try and align myself with the rules, which are no nipples. However, Raven and Rose is such a stylized brand as well. Like there's always like lots of leather jackets and whiskey glasses covering a bust, and there's ways around it. I just use a lot of kind of little posy or aesthetic tricks to.
Yeah, but how do you feel about having to do that as a creative and as a feminist, as a woman? How do you feel about Instagram or I guess these social media channels having these sorts of rules? Because I can imagine not only does it affect your business and your branding and your marketing, but also surely, I guess for me, I feel really strongly about that I just don't understand I just don't understand this lewdness or this kind of modesty culture. Like, what are
Mm,
your thoughts on that?
mm. You know what? I don't mind it as much as I suspect people think I would. I mean, it's a interesting reflection of society as a whole. I don't think it's just Instagram itself. I feel like, I mean, I get why a nipple is covered. I get why you can't show your ass crack or your like vagina, like just as much as they're all parts of sexuality. Um, Even though I don't find the bust or the nipple that offensive, I can see why other people would. So I get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, and I don't live my life by that like that. But I'm on a global platform, which is a it's a platform for all ages as well. So
Mm.
if I was to be able to create an account that was R18, I'd show nipples on it. But I can't. I could have a 7-year-old looking at images that are probably not appropriate for a 7-year-old's mind. They wouldn't understand. They have no understanding of sexuality or the world at that stage. So they probably wouldn't get it and could read quite just things that are not correct from the image. So I get it. I get why you need rules and regulations. I think Instagram is a bit of a beast. I have a very love-hate relationship with it, but it's not a platform for artists. We use it and brands use it. We use it as a tool, but I don't think it was created for us. It's a what is it? It's not a platform created for artists. So I don't feel like I have an artist's right or an artist's freedom to be able to do what I want on it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think obviously living with an artist, as my fiance is, and obviously he draws a lot of female form as well. And I think he's had the same sort of thing as you, where he is posting his art, and it is literally a painting, and he has to manipulate or sort of cover or shade or or obstruct the view of a painted nipple, even if it's on a painting of a statue,
Mm.
which is, yeah, it's crazy because it is a bit of a beast. I think you're right, and I definitely agree that it's not necessarily a platform that was created for artists in mind. So yeah, I
No,
definitely agree with you there.
yeah, and I think, yeah, no, it definitely wasn't created for artists. And to tell the truth, we wouldn't step out into public with our breasts out and just go to the supermarket and shop. So why would you put it in a public platform just like boobs out? I don't know. I feel like it's such a public platform and everyone just has to remember that. And we mold and shape and change our ways all the time. Um, to fit in with what is publicly accepted. And I don't think you have to lose yourself. I don't think you lose your authenticity completely by doing that. I think it's a respectful thing to do that. And I mean, I get why artists are like, I want to show it all. I want to do this. I want to be me. Breasts out. But at the same time, I'm like, but breasts wouldn't be out in a schoolyard or a supermarket, or even like they're restricted on the beaches. They're restricted in public situations, and this is a public situation.
I think it's a really good analogy. Yeah, it's a really, really, really accurate analogy. So going back to Raven and Rose, the brand, I really, I'm very excited to ask you this question. So you named pieces from your second collection after your husband's ex-lovers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that's pretty badass. Like that's a baller move. Why did you choose to do that? What
Oh,
inspired you?
I almost forgot about that collection. Wow, yes. Oh, he'd be so embarrassed by this. I think he found it a little bit more like, obviously, a little bit more like exposing than I did. Well, that collection was all about negative spaces. Not negative as in bad, but negative as the in-between spaces. And oh, it was an ode to the lovers of his past. And it was all about kind of like, you know, those spaces in between, those conversations, those interactions, those kind of those moments that you have outside of your main moments. And so a main moment, for example, being me, his now wife, but the in-between moments being just as important, but often overlooked, or not talked about or forgotten. Those are his ex-girlfriends. I wanted something a little bit daring, a little bit cheeky, a little bit, I love something that's just a slight shock value, but which makes perfect sense. And so the negative spaces, I want a better word for that, the in-between spaces being his ex-girlfriends, which are of huge value to our lives. You know, they taught him, he learned his mistakes, he learned some great techniques from them, he has learned so much from them. And you know, and I'm the recipient of the like all the goodness from them, so I kind of wanted to like pay tribute to the females of his past.
Wow, so that's almost actually kind of a thank you, really, in a way,
Yes.
to all of his past relationships.
Yeah, I never meant it. Yeah, absolutely. I never, yeah, it was definitely never a dig at them. It was just I think, I mean, I feel like these relationships from our past are all of important, like definitely of importance, and they're not usually talked about. And that's fair. However,
Mm.
they do add a lot of value to a current relationship.
How did he feel when you told him that you were going to name them after his exes?
He's such a private person. So he was a bit like, what are you doing? I feel like my husband is continuously rolling his eyes at me, but he's like, okay, just go for it. Like, I trust you. I trust you. I'm like, thanks, babe. Probably would have done it anyway. But like, he's honestly, I love him. I love him because he's like my grounding opposite. It comes from such a conservative nature, but I think he finds my ways very amusing.
Ah,
Such a simple word. But he just kind of watches me. He's like, what is she up to this time? And I kind of like that playfulness.
yeah, you guys definitely have a really, really good balance, I think, in your relationship, for
Mhm.
sure. So, in terms of being a designer, you mentioned earlier that you're kind of you initially thought your concept for the brand was to create lingerie for individuals who maybe felt like they didn't fit within the niche or didn't fit within the sort of the stereotypical kind of concept of sexiness, I guess, and wanted their own niche. So how do you define sexiness? What is that to you? What do you think of when you're designing?
Oh, sexiness for me is such an attitude. It's like a boldness and a kind of give a fuck attitude. It's a female that knows her flaws, but doesn't draw attention to them, doesn't need to hide them, doesn't need to kind of, you know, get all emo about them, just has them like everybody else and gets on with it, just gets on with her sexuality, her um, boldness, her sexiness. So, yeah, I guess when I design for someone that doesn't need to rely on push up or underwire. They don't need to rely on a lot of lace or fanciness in order to feel sexy. They feel sexy regardless. And then this is just a beautiful Raven and Rose is just a beautiful embellishment of that. It just adds
Mm,
like it's like the icing on the cake. She's already there. She is sexy. And this is just added value.
I love that. Do you feel you've been in the sort of fashion industry for quite a while, and I feel like specifically within lingerie, The industry seems to have grown up quite a lot over the last few years, with kind of more of a focus on, I guess, body confidence, and designing with more kind of inclusivity in mind. I know this is something that is very close to your heart. So can you tell me, as a sort of designer, how have you, I guess, shifted along with the attitudes towards sort of beauty standards, as a designer, as someone who I guess is providing these pieces of clothing that are going to give someone that confidence, that are going to give someone that sort of that pleasure and that kind of, like feeling good about themselves. Like, how do you, yeah, I guess sort of like, what are your thoughts, or how important is that to you as a designer?
It's hugely important. Um, being able to being able to, like, for anyone to be able to wear my lingerie regardless of their body shape. However, I will say my niche is an athletic girl. It's a very tomboy girl, and tomboy and athletic can be of any size. Oh, sorry, it can be of any, size, but the shape is very niched in. So I deal with girls that with very broad shoulders, with not much of a waist, maybe hips, maybe not, but a very rectangular shape. So although I am into kind of, dressing everyone in every body shape, I know that my lingerie is not going to fit everyone because it's not designed for everyone. I've designed it for a particular branch of females. And although a very curvy woman can look incredible in it, it's not marketed towards them. I've definitely marketed it towards a certain body shape and lifestyle, and I've done that because I needed to hone in, define my brand quite clearly, and I did not want to please everyone. It was not a brand for the masses. I really wanted to speak to a certain type and style of female. And so I do come into conflict with that a little bit. I have in the past had people question my models, question their size, which is a tough one. Like, when I was in Asia, there weren't plus sizes. I cannot go to, I went to agencies asking for plus sizes, and the girls would still come out smaller than me. And I was like, hey, wait, what? I know. So for one, if I couldn't actually get a variation of sizes to model Raven and Rose. So that was one issue. The other issue with my models being quite athletic-y is that they always look kind of quite muscly and quite like just fine bodied, and people didn't see the broad shoulders or the no hips and no waist. They just saw a slimness, and slimness can be, at this era in fashion, quite offensive. People find a slim body offensive. Like, we've kind of almost like gone right on, like we've flipped, and curvy and bigger is everything, and slim is a thing that gets body shamed quite a lot. But I needed to stay true to my visuals, and I work a lot with bigger body shapes. But the funny thing is, people don't even seem to notice when it's a singular photo on Instagram and a singular person that you have, there's no comparison. If I had a lineup of girls, they could see the bigger and the smaller and the taller and the wider and the thinner. But I usually just shoot with one girl. And even if she is big, people don't even usually notice because she's by herself. So it's a funny dilemma to be in. You get criticized for whatever at whatever stage. Like, I think I'm just past pleasing. I stick to my values and I stick to my niche, and that's who I cater for at this stage. I might create a offset brand. I might do something later in life for bigger busts, but at this stage I don't.
I think that you're very right to sort of, you're sticking to your truth. And I think that, especially when you're building a brand, there's nothing worse than kind of going too broad and, like you said, trying to please everyone, because ultimately you're just not going to be able to define clearly what it is that your mission is. And ultimately, I think that to build a successful brand, you do have to have that very well defined, which it sounds like you do. In terms of people who have worn your lingerie, you have had amazing success with very well known, celebs and models and personalities wearing your brands. What have been some of the highlights for you of kind of representation of your brand?
I actually, this is funny. Off the back of that conversation, I had my brand in Playboy worn by a plus size model. So even though I create and have just talked about this extremely kind of like tomboy, Playboy featured my brand, and she was the first Mexican plus size as well, so a woman of color, which was quite cool. So that was really neat for me because that just hit so many kind of offbeat targets, which was quite neat. So Playboy was a big one. Maxim magazine, that was shot on an a Bollywood star, so that was quite cool as well. Like that was really neat because once again it was just like, really, you like Raven and Rose? Like, I love this. So it's kind of, I like where the brand just kind of ends up. It just goes in these directions that I have, like, I did not intend that, I did not push that, and I love that got picked up in India. It's been Asia's Next Top Model was quite cool, actually. It was used in Asia's Next Top Model for their opening scene, their opening.
It's like the montage at the beginning, right?
Yes, that's what it
Yeah,
is. Yes.
I
And
remember
that was
that.
quite neat as well because that was on obviously quite younger girls of a typical Asian body. So it fitted them all perfectly. And it was so bold. It was so bold for a young Asian girl to be wearing something like Raven and Rose in a very public arena. So that was incredible. But I've done some really cool work with DJs and musicians, a lot in the States. Where else have I had it?
You
Oh, it's
had
just,
didn't one of the Drag Race contestants,
oh,
didn't
yes. Oh,
Violet Chachki?
yes,
That was
yes. So she was.
amazing.
That was amazing. So yes, and that brings me back to um Raven and Rose being such a fluid design. The amount of males that I dress, the amount of drag queens that I dress, is just unbelievable. And I love working in that niche. And that's where my whole kind of aim towards the tomboy style has worked for me because I can fit a trans or a gay or whatever, a man, a straight man. You'd be surprised how many like kinky men come in looking for it or share the lingerie with their partner. It is amazing. It is so amazing. And I love those little avenues that it takes me into people's intimate lives. They're fascinating.
That's so interesting because you almost kind of are involved in all these people's private lives and what they do behind closed doors. In a way, you are involved, but you're not. You're kind of like the silent facilitator, aren't you? With
Yeah,
through your designs.
interesting. It's kind of like I'm there. I almost feel like I'm a bit of sense of normality, as in they will come in and be like, is like, can I, is like, do you mind, is this strange? I'm like, no babe, it's fine, like let's get you dressed. And I love kind of playing that role of acceptance or just allowing them to play out their fantasy or their kink or go down that avenue and feel completely comfortable and non-judged doing that.
Mm. Yeah, that's super important, I think, because it is a time when you're almost kind of you're in a very vulnerable situation, right? Not all of us are even if you look like a supermodel, everyone has their own issues, everyone has their own parts of their body that they don't like and they beat themselves up for, and issues of confidence and stuff. And I think that is something that you really demonstrate, that kind of the confidence and the attitude really speaks through a lot of your designs, and a lot of your branding. It really does speak through and cuts through all of that, which is why I think what you were saying earlier about you know, when you post photos of models that might be, you know, one plus size, and then the next photo might be someone who is more within that tomboy figure, that people don't really seem to notice. Maybe part of it might be because actually the attitude and the confidence is what you see through that, as opposed to the person that happens to be wearing the clothes whilst enjoying wearing those clothes as well.
I posted an image just a few days ago of a female with pretty bad third-degree burns all down her chest, all down her thighs. I haven't had a single comment. No one's noticed. They're not edited out. They're very much on show, but it's not what people look at when they look at her, because like she's wearing the lingerie, she's modeling with mirror balls and this rainbow hair, and she got her makeup done. She styled this by herself. She got her makeup done with a skull face.
Oh,
And
wow.
then she was like, it's a such a playful epic shoot, and her burns are totally on show, but no one's noticed them. And yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the whole, that is so Raven Rose, the kind of the concept that you can have these flaws, and sometimes very obvious flaws, but if you act a certain way, or, you know, think of yourself in a certain way, no one notices them. People are not drawn to your flaws if you're not willing that, or if you're not wanting that.
That reminds me of I guess just a funny anecdote. I don't know where it's from. It might be from a film, but they're talking about oh, that was it. It was from Eat, Pray, Love. Where they're talking about, you know, oh, I've got a muffin top, or I feel really uncomfortable wearing this piece of lingerie, wearing this clothing because I've got a muffin top, and you know, I'm not comfortable wearing that. And the character says, you know, well, you know, have you ever been naked with a man? And he takes one look at you and says, like, get out. And she's like, well, no. So of course not. You know, he's in bed with a naked girl. He's won the jackpot. Like, that's all that really matters. So ultimately, these things that we see when we look in the mirrors, these flaws that we think are so visible, that are so visible to us, actually nobody else is noticing it. So you may as well just sort of walk through with this big smile on your face and be confident in who you are.
Exactly. I get the funniest flaws come through. I remember someone who had, what did she had? She had something about her ears. So I was in the dressing room helping fit her, and it was like her mom used to talk like her ears, and it kind of, and that transcended down to the way she wore lingerie. But I was like, it just gets out of control sometimes. It's like everybody has these flaws, and if we allow them, they're going to kind of offset our entire way of expressing and being, even if they're not related. Like, ears are not related to lingerie. However, she allowed them because, well, she allowed that because she was just so obsessed with this kind of, you know, can't be looking up here, have to distract. But yeah, flaws.
Well, that was something that I think I read in, I think I read it on your website, or you might have said it to me before, where your designs are meant to complement, like you said earlier, they're an embellishment, and they're not meant to hide or manipulate anything, which I think is something that's why I think a lot of people resonate with your brand, is because, and like with your designs, is because it is all about body positivity, because it is all about, you know, and that's why I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the aesthetic that you put out, because it is kind of that, I guess, for lack of a better term, it is that kind of natural beauty that you are celebrating, because everyone's kind of beautiful in their own way. Like, I think that's really, really wonderful. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that you kind of perpetuate through your style, which is wonderful. So in terms of, I had one other question that it might, I don't know. I'm interested to kind of hear your perspective on this. So as a female lingerie designer, I'm really interested to hear your perspective, or if you have a perspective, on this concept of enlightened feminism. So this is this term that was created by this author, Susan Douglas, where essentially they were saying that, to paraphrase, some feminists believe that, you know, being sexually provocative is a way of women to reclaim their power, while others might think that actually it's kind of a subtle form of sexism, because it still perpetuates those kind of like patriarchal views of like women and physical beauty. Where would you stand on this? Because you obviously really celebrate the female form. Do you think that it is a way for women to be empowered? I mean, you must, because I'm
Hmm.
guessing that's why you got into this industry and that's why you started this brand.
Hmm. You know what? You're right. I do feel like it's an amazing part of being a female is our sexuality and how we use that and move people with that. In saying that, though, I am not a fan of pushing together busts and getting big cleavage. I hate pouting and posing and lots of booty, and it's not a vibe that resonates with me. So you'll see through, like, if you go and look at the Raven and Rose aesthetic, there's a lot of slouchiness and, you know, open legs, but they're like kind of sitting on a couch and lazy, and there's a sexiness with the kind of with an absolute raw and untamedness alongside that. There's no like, I do not work with models that give me any like sexy eyes, you know, like all of that I find really uncomfortable. um However, I'm not against it. It's just not me. So I do not find a female who, you know, pushes her bust together and pouts up at the camera. That doesn't turn me on. It's not an aesthetic that I go for. Um, uh, it's just not. However, some females and some males would. So each to their own. I don't think we should be defining feminism with such in such a boxed way. I
Mm.
think feminism should be diverse, and I think females should allow other females to sexually be who they want to be. Um, so that's I don't know. I don't know if I've answered that question so well. I feel like I sound quite in between that with that one, and I probably am. I'm not really for it, but I'm definitely not against it.
Well, I mean, I think that's actually a really accurate analogy for exactly what you just said. You don't think that things need to be put into a box. Nothing is so solidly black or white, and exactly the same thing for you. It's, you know, if it's personal preference of your own aesthetic of where you want your brand to go, that's the direction you want to take it. That being said, if someone is making the choice for themselves to kind of portray themselves in that sort of provocative manner, then that's up to them ultimately. And I think that actually what you answered is exactly sort of what the point you were trying to get across anyway. It was a perfect demonstration of your point.
Okay, deal.
So moving on from sort of work life, you are also a mum. You're a mum of two little ones. So how do you juggle being a mum to two young kids and running a business full time? How do you juggle everything?
Oh, my diary does it for me. I schedule in everything. I have to, otherwise I forget. I schedule in everything. Ugh, whether that's, you know, my workouts in the morning, bedtimes, play dates, business calls, email replying, whatever it is, and I give everything a very like clear time frame to for me to be able to operate in. So I just live a very scheduled life. I'm learning to let go of the schedule when needed. I Yeah, which has been that's definitely been difficult. However, my scheduling allows me to be so organized, very efficient. I get shit done. And if I don't get it done within that time frame, it gets moved to the next day. And it still gets done. However, I think scheduling, I feel that I operate well when my world is scheduled, and I schedule my kids into that world too. So everyone gets time.
Yeah, that's good. I'm definitely one of those people as well. I love a list. I'm very organized. I love my calendar. I'm definitely, yeah, 100% a control freak in some ways. That is definitely learning to, like you said though, learning to kind of let go of that control at the right time when it's comfortable for you, when it works for you, and it works for the people around you and your family and your loved ones. That that needs navigation. That is a challenge, and that I think is something that you learn over time, I guess.
Yeah.
You just have to.
Yeah. You do. Yeah. Like, yeah, I'm very much, so we're the same. We'll get to the end of the day and we'll have our little boxes ticked and feel very accomplished if we've got like a little cross or a tick next to the to-do list. But yeah, I've definitely had to learn to just let things go. And I think that children have been the biggest initiators of that learning curve, because things will arise that I just have to drop everything, and all I have to concentrate on is my child for that day or that hour or whatever it is that they need, whatever it is that they need. And I do not like mixing work and children, so I will not have my computer or my phone out around my children. I have, when it's their dedicated time. So during morning breakfasts or dinners at the table, or whether it's reading time or bedtime or bath time, it doesn't matter if I'm just sitting there. I will sit there and I'll watch them, as opposed to sit there and look at Instagram or answer emails or whatever. I try and keep them very separated so that it never takes over them. I feel it's too easy to be pulled into that world of emails or social media. So I try and keep it away so that my children are always first, and first in their eyes as well. So they always can see that I will always choose them over work.
I think it's really important to kind of have that separation, whether you have kids or not. Oh my God, this year especially though, I mean, when now, well, I guess you've always been quite entrepreneurial and been working on your own projects and your own businesses. So I guess it's slightly different for you, but for a lot of people who have never really navigated the whole working from home whilst also having children around, how do I segment my life when we are quite literally and physically in the same walls all together at the same time, that they demand my attention, but work demands my attention, but I and I think that separation is really important for kind of everyone's mental health and kind of that well-being and that, the personal life. I think it's very easy to get sucked into work life just simply because it is so linear and it's so it's just very clinical, whereas personal life is the stuff that's almost a bit messier, isn't it? So it's quite easy to escape into that.
Yes it is. It's too easy. It's too easy. I like how you said it, like, talk about it as a bit of an escapism, because it really can be. It can be that, it really can be that excuse, like, I'm too busy, or I need to do this, I'd rather do this than explore play or emotions, or deal with an upset. It's so too easy to kind of like go down the other route and jump on the computer.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of your little ones, so how old are they now?
So Ashton, my son, he's my youngest, and he is 3. And Isabella, she is my eldest, and she is just about to turn 6.
I mean, it's a very, I mean, it's such a stereotype to say, but the time really does fly, because I still
Oh,
remember when you were pregnant the
I
first time.
know. I know.
It does not feel like it was that long ago. Wow, 6 years, that's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to hear more in terms of like your mum life, I guess. Not that it's separate from work life, because it is still you. All of it makes up you. It's all your identity, and it all makes up who you are. But you're very much kind of like an extrovert, like me. And your husband, as we were saying earlier, is very much your kind of your opposite. Have you seen sort of similarities, or like sort of in your children, like who sort of seems to resemble which parent more? Do you see sort of like what elements of yourself or of your husband do you see in your kids?
Yeah, I think my children are so lucky to be like the best of both of us. So they come out, they surprise me. My Isabella is so extroverted. She is such a show pony. She can chat. Like, I remember walking her to school being tired and being like, sweet, for 10 minutes I don't have to talk, because she'll talk the entire way. I used to love that about her. I used to love that she could just rant off and go on her little kind of like verbal missions. She's so entertaining. So she definitely takes after me in that sense, but at the same time she has some really interesting tendencies. Like she's very sensitive to noise, for example, which is a strange trait, but it's a very, she can go quite inner, she can go quite introverted, quite reflective, quite emotional, quite inside, and that's very much her daddy. And when that happens, any kind of outside influence can jolt her or be quite just be quite jarring for her little space at that time. And I think that's a very daddy trait. But the cool thing is what comes out of that is a lot of self-reflection. So even at 6, she is just so beautifully emotional. And I say emotional not in the female who's got a period type of way. I say emotional and just she's very in touch with the highs and the lows and what that means to her, and how she treats people and reactions she gets. So I definitely see both of us and Isabella, and the same goes for Ashton. Ashton is he's cheeky. Oh, he is, and he loves a little line, like a boundary line, and he'll walk up to it and never step over it, but he'll put his little toes like right up on the edge and like stick his tummy out over it and kind of like be like the naughty one, but not be able to get caught for it. And I think that's very much like a me thing. Like I do love boundaries and lines, but I'll definitely play around with them a fair bit. However, at the same time, he doesn't talk much at all. He was never a baby that gurgled or cooed. He never cried much. He's so chilled. He is so relaxed, and he just kind of gets on with life quite quietly. He's interestingly social. He's always around people, but he's never the one in front of people. And I think that's very much my husband. So again, he is a really awesome merge of the both of us, but in a quirky way.
That's so adorable. And oh my gosh, yeah, that going right up to that boundary line. I mean, hello, you've created a rebellious lingerie brand. Everything about it is rebellion and everything about it is kind of bending the rules. So, I mean, I wonder where he gets that from. But that's interesting about Isabella though with the sound thing, because you know what, my stepson has a very similar thing with noise, really similar thing with noise. And he always has from when he was younger. He's less so now, like he's getting a little bit older, he's almost 9. So yeah, a little bit less so as he grows a bit older, but definitely loud noises and big noises, or you know, in like a movie. And it's not even like it doesn't even need to be a scary movie, it can be a kids film, or like not a scary film, not that we show them that, but you know, like Witches or something, where like it's still a kids film but it was bloody traumatizing when you watch it. Like, but so, yeah, it doesn't even need to be something like that, but like a loud noise can be really, yeah, he hears things, he's like hypersensitive to that sort of stuff as well, which is really, really interesting when you see that. And you see it in kids, and you're like, and the first time you're like, oh my god, you're freaking out, you're like, are they okay, are they scared, do I need to comfort them, what's going on? And then you get used to it, and then you realize that, oh no, that's just kind of just, that's just them, that's just the way that they are.
Yeah, it's so amazing being able to see the world through your children, because the world is a very different place through their eyes, and it's quite neat to be able to experience that, isn't it? Like, it's just, yeah, the world shows up to be such a different place when you share it with a family.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. So, for someone who is obviously a very sort of strong, successful woman, how are you navigating? And I think that a lot of parents, especially mums, and especially working mums, there's such a there's such an expectation, I think, of, well, what are you doing to raise, you know, your children to be X, Y, and Z, to be successful, to be confident, to be this, that, and the other. I mean, do you feel pressure or expectation to do that, or do you feel like you're naturally doing that just based on your personality anyway?
I ignore a lot of social pressure. I made a very clear decision to do that very early on in my motherhood. Um, and that in itself is a form of boldness or braveness or confidence that I want my kids to have. This ability to take someone's opinion or not. Um, however, still be able to fit into a community. So it's about being yourself and being authentic without a need to bend yourself to others' expectations. However, at the same time, acknowledging the community that you live in and, changing your ways if it means, not changing your ways, but I guess accepting your community and accepting your position in it.
Like kind
But
of
that
being
doesn't always,
conscious of others.
being conscious of others, definitely. But that doesn't always mean you have to do what they do. Like quite the opposite. And I love that people can be completely different and live in complete harmony. Hello, husband. Like my husband and I are exactly that. Very different backgrounds, very different communities. And yet we have a very peaceful life. We have a very we merge effortlessly. And we extend that to the way we, like our greater community and the way our children should interact with it. So still being yourself, but allowing the opinions of others, but not necessarily taking them on.
Yeah, definitely. It gives me a lot of hope, I think, for, I guess, maybe our generation as parents. I think it's kind of, well, maybe it's different because I think we have quite different backgrounds, you and me, and I think quite different upbringings, just simply because I think I had the added kind of element of coming from an Asian background and kind of my mum's Chinese. So I think that there's a lot of cultural expectation and pressure there that I think even as an adult I'm still really like kind of navigating and dealing with. But that being said, I think that with that next generation, like kind of our kids, it's definitely something that for me, it's stuff that I want to instill is kind of like exactly what you said. It's be kind and, be conscious of others, but ultimately you don't need to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.
Oh my goodness, that's such a nice way of putting it. And you're so right. And we deal with it already with Isabella. Now she's at school level. She's often coming home with her best friend. Oh, so for example, Isabella wants a Star Wars party for her 6th birthday. So we're doing a Star Wars party. And her best friend and most of the girls don't know what Star Wars is because
Bad
because
education.
they're girls, you know what I mean? Like it's like the Barbie or LOLs or whatever is the biggest things in their lives. And so her best friend at school, remembering she's 6, threw a bit of a huff and was like, I'm not coming. And she refused to accept the invite at first because she didn't know what Star Wars was and she wasn't going to come. And Isabella comes up in Isabella's life quite a bit. And instead of going like, oh, don't worry about it, babe, like, oh, I'm sure she'll come, oh, like trying to kind of be, kind of accepting her little best friend's point of view, we just kind of went, well, oh, well, so what? Like she misses out then, doesn't she? Like being a little bit more hard-assed about it instead of taking a softer, like, oh, don't worry about it. We're like, that's how do you feel about that? That's like, and when she says she's upset, we're like, yeah, we're upset about that too. Like just kind of being like, oh, accepting that you can get angry and upset. And if she doesn't want to come, whatever, she misses out. But we didn't want Isabella to have to change her theme or become softer or like nurture this girl. We're just like, you know what? If she doesn't want to come, she doesn't want to come. Like that's her thing. You carry on and you do your thing.
That's such a crucial life lesson that I think that certainly is something that I missed out on, like learning when I was growing up, was exactly that, is that the only thing that you can control in life, and this is such a stereotypical self-help bullshit thing to say, but like genuinely, like the only thing that you can control in your life is your thought process, is how you deal with things, is how you internalize it, it's how you process the world around you. Ultimately, you cannot process what someone else thinks of you. You can try and, be the best you that you can be, but ultimately sometimes, there's going to be a disconnect. There's going to be a mismatch with certain people and certain things, and you cannot bend over backwards to try and change that. And you cannot berate yourself and beat yourself up for it. And I think that that is such a wonderful thing that you are teaching your kids from such an early age, is to have that confidence in themselves, but also that acknowledgement of like, ultimately, listen, you're not going to please everyone, but at least you should please yourself, and that's the most important thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's a little kind of quote that is so online with exactly what you're saying that I live by, and it goes, what's the point of your own thoughts if you're always worried about what everyone else is thinking? And I love that. I love that because it gives strength to your individuality, your kind of highs and lows and fierceness and power and vulnerability, and it gives you the power. And how many people are in this world? 7 billion, 8 billion, I don't know. Why worry about there's too many people to worry about too many people. If you're worried about what all those people are thinking of you, you're not going to get anywhere. And what does it matter anyway? What does it matter? You find your crew, you find your people, you find your lipstick gang, like you find that and you resonate with only a very few people, and those opinions count. Even if they differ from you, they count. The bus driver's opinion, your teacher's opinion, like the woman in the supermarket line, those opinions don't count. I mean, you can take them on and you can reflect and you can think about them, but you shouldn't change who you are to fit in with the masses.
Which is pretty much exactly why you started your brand as well, wasn't it? It was also, you didn't want to fit in necessarily with the masses, and you didn't want to market something for the masses.
Yeah, you're right. My brand is definitely an extension of me as a person. My brand is definitely an ethos that I live by, and it's just a visual element of that, a visual expression. So yeah, it is. It is so me.
I love that. So I want to switch things up slightly before we wrap up. So I would love for us to play a little quickfire word association game.
Oh,
So
no.
don't think, just clear your mind, and I'm going to list off a sort of X or Y, and I want you to answer with the first thing that you sort of like resonate with. So which one you resonate with more.
You have a practice one.
Okay, so one of them would be like, it would be like, okay, so tea or coffee, and I want you to not think and just answer.
Oh, coffee. Okay, good. Oh, I've got
Exactly.
this. I've got this.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's start. Okay, so summer or winter?
Winter.
Leather or lace?
Leather.
Naked or sheer?
Share.
Whiskey or wine?
Whiskey.
Black or red?
Ooh, black. That was a tough one.
Flowers or chocolates?
Flowers.
You weren't supposed to think. I could see you thinking just then.
I'm sorry, but I was evenly spread between those two.
Okay, flowers. All right. Cuffs or rope?
Oh, rope.
Tattoos or piercings?
Tattoos.
Boots or heels?
Boots.
I love that. I think that we agree on a lot of those things, to be
Yeah,
honest. I was thinking through that. I was like, very similar. Cool. So I only have two final questions, really, to wrap things up. So first off is, and I guess it kind of ties in with a lot of what we were talking about just now in terms of raising kids to be confident. But if you could go back in time and kind of give advice to your younger self, what would you say?
People always think more about themselves than they think of you. And what I'd mean by that is, issues that we've touched on in this podcast being, your own faults or your own flaws, and people always, consumed with themselves. What they walk into a room full of people and they wonder, they're thinking about like themselves. Like, you can be in this room and they're not thinking about you. So It's just, yes,
I
people
think that's
don't think
good.
about you as much as you expect them to.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice that I definitely could use a lot of as well. So I'm going to take that mantra on board as well. And then finally, so I ask all of the guests this, as it is the lipstick gang. Favorite lip color?
Oh, red. Definitely red. Definitely red. Red and two faves. One being from Dolce and Gabbana. It's I can't remember the name of it. It's like a matte red, fire, like an orange based fire red. And in the same kind of color vein, one by Natasha Moore, our girlfriend. What is Storm? I'm pretty
Mm,
sure that's the name of it. But man, that lives forever. You can put it on once and you're like set for the day. And I love that. I love that it's perfection, regardless of like who you're kissing or what you're drinking.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, I mean, yeah, red seems to be a very popular color with all of the guests. I love it. I think I completely agree. I think it's that instant attitude.
Mm.
And it does give you that kind of that confidence and that ability to kind of walk in and be like, yeah, I'm a badass. Like, and, I can
And it,
take on the world.
yeah, like I remember as a new mom, I wore it all the time because I was like, no one is going to be looking at my under eye bags if they're looking at my lips. Definitely a good one for mamas.
I love that. Well, that's it. I don't have any other questions, but I mean, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning. I know that you schedule everything in, so thank you for scheduling in this chat.
Oh, such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
It was
So
so
nice.
nice catching up. And if people want to find you and want to look into Raven and Rose, where can they find you?
So my Raven and Rose Instagram is at Raven and Rose. And then my designer Instagram is jasmine.x.smith.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jasmine, for joining us and sharing all of these wonderful stories. I hope that you have a beautiful rest of the day.
Oh, thank you. You too.